The screams of dying cattle echoed across the Wyoming plains as Victoria Ashford pressed 3 shivering children against the wooden walls of the abandoned trading post, knowing that if the rustlers found them here, nobody would ever know what happened to the unwanted orphans of Shoshone City. The year was 1878, and in this harsh territory, survival meant staying invisible, especially when you were caring for children that even the local church had turned away. Victoria had learned that lesson 6 months ago when she'd taken in her first child, a half-Shoshone girl named Sarah, who'd been found wandering the streets after her mother died of fever. Since then, 4 more had found their way to her small, dilapidated house on the edge of town, each one rejected by the respectable families who wanted perfect, white, healthy children to help with their farms. The gunshots faded into the distance, and Victoria finally allowed herself to breathe. She looked down at the 3 children she'd managed to grab when the shooting started. Sarah, now 7 years old, stared up at her with those serious dark eyes that had seen too much. Tommy, a 5-year-old boy with a twisted foot that made him limp, clutched her skirt. And little James, barely 4, with the port wine stain covering half his face that made the townspeople whisper about devil's marks. She'd left the 2 others back at the house, both older and capable of hiding if trouble came. Michael at 10 could take care of 8-year-old Ruth. She prayed they were safe. "Miss Victoria, are the bad men gone?" Tommy whispered, his voice trembling. "They're gone, sweetheart. We're going to wait just a bit longer to be sure, and then we'll head home." Victoria smoothed his sandy hair, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. The truth was, she had no idea if those men were really gone or if they'd circle back. The truth was, she had $12 to her name and 5 hungry children to feed. The truth was, the landlord had given her until the end of the month to come up with 3 months back rent, or he'd throw them all out onto the street. The trading post had been abandoned for 2 years, ever since the Shoshone had been pushed further north and the trade dried up. Dust covered everything, and animal droppings suggested that creatures had made homes in the corners. But it had 4 walls and a roof, and when Victoria had heard the first gunshot while walking back from the general store with her meager purchases, it had been the closest shelter. She'd been a schoolteacher once, back in Ohio. That felt like a lifetime ago now. She'd come west with her brother and his wife, seeking adventure and a new life. But cholera had taken them both within weeks of arriving in Wyoming, leaving Victoria alone in a strange land with nothing but her teaching skills and a determination not to return east in defeat. Shoshone City had no school, no need for a teacher. What it had was saloons, ranches, a handful of shops, and people too busy surviving to care about a young woman trying to do the same. Taking in Sarah had been impulsive. The girl had been crying outside the general store, hungry and alone. Victoria had bought her a piece of bread with money she couldn't spare, and when she'd asked around about the child's family, she'd been met with shrugs and suggestions to take the girl to the territorial authorities in the next county over. That would have meant a 3-day journey each way, and Victoria knew what happened to half-Shoshone children in those institutions. So she'd taken Sarah home instead. Word had spread, apparently. A woman too soft-hearted to turn away a child. The others had come one by one. Tommy, abandoned by a father who couldn't afford to feed a crippled son. James, left on her doorstep with a note that said simply, "Please." Ruth, whose mother had died giving birth to a stillborn baby, leaving the girl with no other family. And Michael, caught stealing food from the bakery and beaten so badly he couldn't walk for a week. The baker's wife had brought him to Victoria instead of the sheriff, knowing that a 10-year-old thief would likely face adult punishment. 5 children, 5 mouths to feed. 5 souls that nobody else wanted. Victoria waited another 20 minutes before leading the children out of the trading post. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful, this wild land, even with all its dangers. She'd fallen in love with the vast openness of it, the way the wind swept across the plains carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. They walked quickly back toward town, Victoria's hand firmly gripping Sarah's, while Tommy and James held onto her skirt. The house she rented was barely more than a shack, sitting on the eastern edge of Shoshone City where the buildings gave way to open range. But it had a stove, 2 small rooms, and a roof that only leaked in one corner. She'd made it home. Michael met them at the door, his young face tight with worry. "Miss Victoria," a man came by, a rancher. He left a note. Victoria's stomach dropped. More trouble, probably. Someone complaining about the children making noise or some other excuse to make their lives harder. She took the folded paper from Michael's outstretched hand and opened it. The handwriting was surprisingly neat, strong letters formed with obvious care. "Miss Ashford, I would like to speak with you regarding a matter of business. Please come to the Quinn O'Brien Ranch tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I will send a wagon for you and the children. Quinn O'Brien." Quinn O'Brien. Victoria knew the name. Everyone in Shoshone City knew the name. He owned the largest ranch in the territory, thousands of acres of prime grazing land that stretched from the foothills to the river. He employed over 30 men and ran cattle by the hundreds. He was also, by all accounts, a hard man, fair but demanding. He'd built his ranch from nothing over the past 15 years, arriving in Wyoming territory as a young man with nothing but a horse and ambition. "What does it say?" Michael asked, trying to read over her shoulder. "A rancher wants to speak with me tomorrow." Victoria folded the note carefully, her mind racing. What could Quinn O'Brien possibly want with her? She couldn't imagine it was anything good. Men like that didn't notice women like her unless there was a problem. "Are we in trouble?" Ruth appeared from the back room, her blonde braids slightly askew. "No, darling. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about." Victoria hung her shawl on the peg by the door and moved to the stove, where a pot of thin vegetable soup sat waiting. She'd made it stretch as far as she could, adding water and the last of their potatoes. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out where their next meal would come from. That night, after she'd tucked all 5 children into their shared bed in the back room and settled herself onto the pile of blankets in the front room that served as her bed, Victoria lay awake staring at the ceiling. The note from Quinn O'Brien worried her more than she wanted to admit. In her experience, when powerful men wanted to speak with powerless women, it rarely ended well for the women. But she had no choice. You didn't refuse a summons from Quinn O'Brien. Not in Shoshone City. Not if you wanted to continue living here peacefully. The wagon arrived promptly at 9:30 the next morning. Victoria had dressed the children in their best clothes, which wasn't saying much. She'd mended every piece multiple times, and they were all slightly too small or too large, depending on which child wore them. She'd done her best with her own appearance, too, wearing her gray dress that was only a little faded, her dark hair pinned up neatly under her bonnet. The driver was a weathered man in his 50s who introduced himself as Pete. He helped Victoria and the children into the wagon with surprising gentleness, especially when Tommy struggled with his twisted foot. "The boss said to bring you all comfortable," Pete said as he climbed back onto the driver's seat. "It's about an hour's ride to the ranch." The children were excited despite Victoria's nervousness. They so rarely got to leave the house, and a wagon ride was a grand adventure. Sarah sat close to Victoria, always the serious one, but even she seemed intrigued by the journey. They rode through town, past the general store and the sheriff's office, past the saloon where rough laughter spilled out even at this early hour. Then they were out onto the open plains, following a well-worn road that cut through the grasslands. Quinn O'Brien's ranch was impressive. Victoria had heard descriptions, but seeing it was different. The main house was a large, solid structure built from pine logs, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Behind it stretched an entire compound of buildings including barns, a bunkhouse, storage sheds, and corrals filled with horses. Cattle dotted the landscape as far as she could see, and men worked at various tasks around the property. Pete pulled the wagon up in front of the main house just as a man stepped out onto the porch. Victoria's breath caught slightly. Quinn O'Brien was not what she'd expected. She'd pictured someone older, grizzled perhaps. But the man who stood before her looked to be in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair, and an angular face weathered by sun and wind. He wore working clothes, denim trousers, and a simple cotton shirt, a kerchief tied around his neck. His eyes were a striking green, unusual and intense as they took in the wagon's occupants. "Miss Ashford," he said, his voice deep and measured, "thank you for coming." His gaze moved to the children, lingering on each face with an expression Victoria couldn't quite read. "Please, come inside." "All of you." Victoria helped the children down from the wagon, her heart pounding. Quinn O'Brien descended the porch steps and immediately went to Tommy, who was struggling to climb down with his bad foot. "Let me help you, son," Quinn said, and before Victoria could protest, he'd lifted Tommy down with easy strength, setting him gently on the ground. Tommy looked up at the tall rancher with wide eyes. "Thank you, sir," the boy said softly. "You're welcome." Quinn straightened and gestured toward the house. "I have lemonade and cookies waiting. My housekeeper makes the best sugar cookies in Wyoming territory." This was not what Victoria had expected. She gathered the children and followed Quinn into the house, her mind spinning with confusion. The interior was as impressive as the exterior, comfortable and well-furnished without being ostentatious. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and the furniture was solid and practical. A woman in her 60s appeared from what must be the kitchen, carrying a tray laden with glasses and a plate piled high with cookies. "Mrs. Chen, thank you," Quinn said. "Children, please sit and help yourselves." The children looked at Victoria for permission. She nodded, still wary, and they descended on the cookies with the enthusiasm of children who rarely got such treats. Mrs. Chen poured lemonade for everyone, her lined face breaking into a smile at their obvious enjoyment. Quinn waited until the children were settled before turning to Victoria. "Miss Ashford, shall we speak in my office? The children will be fine here with Mrs. Chen." Victoria hesitated, but she could see no way to refuse. She followed Quinn down a short hallway to a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk. He gestured to a comfortable chair before sitting in his own chair behind the desk. "I'll be direct, Miss Ashford, because I suspect you're worried about why I asked you here." Quinn leaned forward, his green eyes serious. "I've been watching your situation for several weeks now. The children you've taken in, the struggles you're facing. I know you're behind on rent and running out of options." Victoria felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. "I don't need charity, Mr. O'Brien. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering something quite different." Quinn stood and moved to the window, looking out over his ranch. "I'm 32 years old, Miss Ashford. I've spent the last 15 years building this ranch into something substantial, but it's just land and cattle. It's not a home. It's not a family." Victoria waited, not sure where this was going. Quinn turned back to face her. "I've decided I want children. I want a family, but I'm not interested in courting some young woman who'll expect romance and pretty words. I'm a practical man and I'm looking for a practical arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Victoria asked carefully. "Marriage, to you, and adoption of all 5 of your children." Quinn said it as calmly as if he were discussing a cattle purchase. "You need security and resources to care for those children. I need a wife and a family." "It seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement." Victoria stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You want to marry me? You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're educated, which is clear from how you speak. I know you're hardworking because you've been taking in sewing and laundry to make ends meet. I know you're kind-hearted because you took in children that nobody else would touch. And I know you're brave because you're still fighting even though the odds are stacked against you." Quinn crossed his arms. "That's more than most people know about each other when they marry." "This is insane," Victoria said, though her voice lacked conviction. Was it really more insane than her current situation? Was it more insane than watching children go hungry because she couldn't earn enough money to feed them? "Think about it practically," Quinn continued. "Those children need a real home. They need food and security and a chance at a decent life. You can't give them that, not on your own. I can. This ranch is profitable. There's plenty of space, plenty of food, plenty of work for everyone. Michael's old enough to start learning ranch work if he's interested. The younger ones can just be children for once. And what would you get out of this arrangement?" Victoria asked, trying to match his practical tone even as her mind reeled. "A wife. A family. Children to raise and eventually pass this ranch on to. Someone to share meals with and talk to in the evenings. I'm tired of eating alone and sleeping in an empty house." Quinn's expression softened slightly. "I'm not expecting love, Miss Ashford. I'm not even expecting affection at first, but I am hoping for partnership. Respect. Maybe friendship in time." Victoria looked down at her hands, calloused from hard work and washing. Marriage to a stranger. It should have been unthinkable. But she thought of Tommy's thin face, of the way Sarah tried so hard to help with the younger children, of Michael taking on adult responsibilities at 10 years old. She thought of the landlord's threats and her dwindling options. "This is a lot to consider," she said quietly. "Of course. Take time to think about it, a week if you need it." Quinn returned to his desk. "In the meantime, I'd like to send supplies with you. Food for the children at least. No strings attached. I told you I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's common decency." Quinn's tone was firm. "Those children are hungry, Miss Ashford. Your pride shouldn't prevent them from eating." He was right, and Victoria hated that he was right. She nodded stiffly. "Thank you." They returned to the main room where the children had demolished the cookies, and were now listening with rapt attention, as Mrs. Chen told them a story about growing up in China before coming to America. The children looked happier than Victoria had seen them in weeks, and the sight made her chest ache. Quinn knelt down to the children's level. "I hope you all enjoyed your visit. Pete is going to load up the wagon with some supplies for Miss Victoria. Would you like to see the horses before you go?" The chorus of excited agreement made Quinn smile, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. Victoria watched as he led the children outside, shortening his stride to match theirs, pointing out different horses and letting them pet the gentle noses that stretched over the corral fence. Tommy laughed when a horse nibbled at his hair, a sound of pure joy that Victoria hadn't heard from him before. "He's a good man," Mrs. Chen said quietly, coming to stand beside Victoria. "Lonely but good. This ranch needs the sound of children." "Did he tell you what he proposed?" Victoria asked. "He mentioned he might ask you to marry him. He's been thinking about it for weeks, ever since he noticed you and the children at church." Mrs. Chen looked at her with kind eyes. I know it seems sudden, but Mr. Quinn doesn't do anything without thinking it through. If he's decided you're the right person, he means it. The wagon ride back to town was much different from the ride out. The children chattered excitedly about the horses and the ranch and the cookies, while Victoria sat in silent contemplation. The wagon bed was filled with supplies, flour and sugar and salt, dried beef and beans, even fresh vegetables from the ranch's garden. Enough food to last them 2 weeks at least. That night, after the children were asleep with full bellies for the first time in days, Victoria sat at the small table and really considered Quinn O'Brien's proposal. Marriage without love, partnership instead of romance, security in exchange for companionship. She'd never imagined her life would lead here. Growing up in Ohio, she dreamed of a traditional courtship, falling in love with a kind man, having children of her own. But life had taken those dreams and twisted them into something unrecognizable. Her brother was dead. She was alone in a harsh territory with 5 children depending on her. Romance seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford, but could she really marry a stranger? Share a home with him, share a life? The thought made her anxious, but when she examined that anxiety closely, she realized it wasn't fear of Quinn himself. He'd been nothing but respectful, even kind. It was fear of the unknown, of making such a permanent decision based on practical need rather than emotion. She thought about what he'd said. Partnership, respect, friendship in time. Those weren't such terrible foundations for a marriage. Many marriages started with less and grew into something real. 3 days later, Victoria sent word to Quinn O'Brien that she wanted to speak with him. He arrived at her door within 2 hours, riding a large bay horse and looking windswept from the ride. "Miss Ashford," he said, removing his hat as she opened the door. "Mr. O'Brien, thank you for coming." Victoria stepped aside to let him in. The children were at the table, practicing their letters on slates Victoria had managed to get from the general store on credit. They looked up with interest at their visitor. "Hello, children," Quinn said with a small smile. "Don't let me interrupt your lessons." They returned to their work, though Victoria noticed Sarah watching Quinn with her serious, assessing gaze. Victoria led Quinn to the far corner of the room, as much privacy as the small space allowed. "I've thought about your proposal," she said quietly. "I have questions." "Of course." "The children. You said you'd adopt them all, but they're not easy children, Mr. O'Brien. Tommy's foot will never be right. James's birthmark won't fade. Sarah's half Shoshone, and people have opinions about that. Ruth and Michael have their own hurts and needs. You need to understand what you'd be taking on." Quinn's expression was steady. "I understand that they're children who need a home and a family. The rest is just details. It's not just details to the world. People will judge you for taking them in. Your ranch hands might not like it. The town will talk. Let them talk. It's my ranch and my family." Quinn's tone was firm. "Miss Ashford, I grew up in an orphanage in Boston. I know what it feels like to be the unwanted child. I know what it means to be judged for circumstances beyond your control. Those children deserve better, and I can give them better." Victoria felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just a business arrangement for him. This was personal. "You never mentioned that before." "I don't talk about my past much. But I want you to understand that I'm not doing this on a whim. I know exactly what I'm asking for, and I want it." Quinn glanced over at the children, still bent over their slates. "All of it." "What about us? You and me?" Victoria forced herself to ask the difficult question. "You said you're not expecting love, but marriage is more than just sharing a house." Quinn met her eyes directly. "I'll be honest with you, Miss Ashford. I'm hoping that in time we'll come to care for each other, maybe even love each other, but I won't force anything. We'll have separate rooms at first if that makes you more comfortable. We'll take time to know each other. I'm not looking for a servant or a woman to warm my bed. I'm looking for a partner, and partnerships take time to build." His frankness was startling but also reassuring. "Separate rooms," Victoria repeated. "Until or unless you decide otherwise. The house has 4 bedrooms, plenty of space." Quinn shifted his weight. "I won't lie to you. Eventually I would hope for a real marriage in all ways, but there's no rush. We have time to figure out how this works between us." Victoria took a deep breath. "If I agree to this, I need your word that the children come first, that you'll treat them as your own, not as charity cases or second-class citizens in your home. You have my word. They'll be O'Briens, legally adopted with all the rights and privileges that entails. And if it doesn't work, if we can't make this partnership function," Quinn was quiet for a moment, "then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I'm committing to this, Miss Ashford. I'm not a man who goes back on his word. If we do this, I'm in it for the long term." Victoria looked over at the children, at their bent heads and thin frames and the way they crowded together at the small table. She thought about the landlord's threats and the approaching winter and the impossibility of her situation. She thought about Quinn O'Brien's steady green eyes and his matter-of-fact kindness and his own history as an unwanted child. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll marry you." Quinn didn't smile or show triumph. He simply nodded as if she'd agreed to something inevitable. "Thank you. I'll make the arrangements. We can marry next week if that's acceptable. I'll speak with the preacher and handle the legal paperwork for the adoptions." "Next week." Victoria's heart raced. "So soon? Is that too fast? I can wait if you need more time." Victoria shook her head. "The landlord would be coming for his rent at the end of next week. Better to be gone before then." "Next week is fine." They were married on a Tuesday morning in the small church on the edge of Shoshone City. The preacher seemed confused by the arrangement but willing enough once Quinn made a generous donation to the church fund. Mrs. Chen was there, along with Pete and a few of Quinn's ranch hands. The children sat in the front pew, dressed in new clothes that Quinn had purchased from the general store. Victoria wore a simple blue dress, also new, and felt like she was watching the ceremony from outside her own body. Quinn's hand was warm and calloused when he took hers to slip the gold band onto her finger. His voice was steady as he spoke the vows. When the preacher told him to kiss his bride, Quinn leaned in and brushed his lips against Victoria's cheek, a chaste and respectful gesture that somehow made the whole thing more real. They were married. She was Victoria O'Brien now. And the 5 children sitting in that pew were about to become O'Briens too. The ranch hands had prepared a celebration meal in the main house, and the children were delighted by the abundance of food and the attention from the weathered cowboys who made exaggerated jokes and taught them simple rope tricks. Victoria watched it all with a sense of unreality, this sudden transformation of their lives. Quinn stayed by her side throughout the meal, occasionally touching her elbow or back with a gentle courtesy that suggested he was aware of her discomfort and trying to ease it. When Michael asked if he could really learn to ride horses, Quinn smiled and said, "Starting tomorrow if you'd like." After the meal, Quinn showed them to their rooms. The children would share 2 bedrooms, the boys in one and the girls in another, with real beds and warm quilts. They were overwhelmed with delight, bouncing on the mattresses and exclaiming over the spaciousness. Then Quinn led Victoria down the hall to a room at the back of the house. "This is yours," he said, opening the door to reveal a comfortable bedroom with a large bed, a wardrobe, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the eastern pastures. "My room is across the hall. The door locks from the inside if that makes you feel more secure." "Thank you," Victoria said softly, moved by his consideration. Quinn hesitated in the doorway. "I know this is strange. I know you probably have a lot of fears and concerns, but I want you to know that I meant what I said. We'll take this at whatever pace you need." That night, lying in the most comfortable bed she'd experienced in years, Victoria listened to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. Closer, she could hear the children's voices from their rooms, excited whispers and giggles that spoke of happiness and security. And across the hall was Quinn O'Brien, her husband, a man she barely knew but who had given her and the children a chance at a real life. She didn't love him, but she thought perhaps she could come to respect him, and maybe that was enough of a beginning. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment. Victoria was used to scraping by, to rationing every bite of food and every scrap of resource. The abundance of Quinn's ranch was overwhelming. Mrs. Chen showed her the pantry, stocked with more food than Victoria had seen in one place since leaving Ohio. The kitchen garden produced fresh vegetables. The chickens provided eggs daily. The ranch had its own smokehouse and dairy. "Mr. Quinn wants you to know that you're mistress of this house now," Mrs. Chen said. "I'll help you learn how everything works, but the decisions are yours to make." Victoria wasn't sure she was ready for that responsibility, but she threw herself into learning. She woke early each morning to help prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, learning the rhythms of feeding a large operation. She took over the household accounts, her teacher's education making the numbers manageable. She organized the children's days, ensuring they had time for both education and play. Quinn was gone much of each day, working the ranch alongside his men. But he made a point of being present for the evening meal, sitting at the head of the long table in the dining room while Victoria sat at the foot, and the children ranged along the sides. He asked about their days, listened to their stories, helped Michael with reading after dinner, and showed genuine interest in their lives. Victoria watched him with the children and saw the patience that surprised her. When Tommy struggled to keep up during a walk around the property, Quinn simply slowed down without comment. When Sarah was standoffish and wary, he gave her space but left small gifts where she'd find them, interesting rocks or a feather from a hawk. When James asked endless questions about everything from cattle to clouds, Quinn answered each one seriously. One evening, about 3 weeks into the marriage, Victoria found Quinn in his office reviewing ledgers. She knocked softly on the doorframe. "Do you have a moment?" "Of course." Quinn set down his pen and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, I just wanted to say thank you." Victoria settled into the chair. "For all of this. For the children especially, you've been wonderful with them." Quinn looked slightly uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just treating them like children should be treated. That's more than most people do." Victoria folded her hands in her lap. "I see how patient you are with Tommy, how you've been winning Sarah over. They're starting to feel safe here." "Good, that's what I wanted." Quinn leaned back in his chair. "And you, are you starting to feel safe here?" It was a perceptive question. Victoria considered it honestly. "I think so. It's still strange waking up here being married to you, but it's not bad strange, just different." "Different I can work with." Quinn's expression was thoughtful. "You know, we've been so focused on the children and the household that we haven't spent much time getting to know each other. Would you like to take a ride tomorrow? Just the two of us. Mrs. Chen can watch the children for a few hours." Victoria felt a flutter of nervousness but also curiosity. "I haven't ridden a horse in years. I have a gentle mare that would be perfect. We can take it slow." Quinn smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I'd like to show you the ranch properly. And I'd like to talk with you, just talk. without children or ranch hands or responsibilities for a little while. "All right," Victoria agreed. "I'd like that." The next morning, Quinn saddled 2 horses and helped Victoria mount a sweet-tempered chestnut mare named Daisy. Her riding skills came back quickly, muscle memory taking over, and soon they were riding side by side across the grasslands. Quinn was an excellent rider, moving with his horse in perfect unity, but he kept the pace easy for Victoria's sake. They rode for nearly an hour before Quinn led them to a spot on a small rise that overlooked a valley where a stream cut through the grassland. Cottonwood trees grew along the water's edge, their leaves rustling in the breeze. It was beautiful and peaceful, with nothing but nature and sky in every direction. They dismounted, and Quinn spread a blanket he'd brought in his saddlebag, along with a canteen and some of Mrs. Chen's biscuits. They sat together, not quite touching, and looked out over the land. "I bought this ranch 15 years ago," Quinn said. "It was nothing then, just open range and a couple of broken-down buildings, but I saw what it could be. I worked like a dog for the first 5 years, barely sleeping, barely eating, just focused on building something that would last." "You've certainly done that," Victoria said. "The ranch is impressive." "It's successful," Quinn corrected. "But it's not what I want it to be yet. A ranch should be more than just a business. It should be a legacy, something to pass down, a place where a family grows and thrives." He glanced at her. "That's what I'm hoping to build now, the second part." Victoria pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. "Can I ask you something personal? Anything? Why didn't you marry before? You're successful, established. You could have courted someone properly, done this the traditional way." Quinn was quiet for a moment, staring out at the valley. "I did court someone, actually, about 5 years ago. The daughter of a rancher from the next county. Pretty girl, good family. We were engaged to be married. What happened? She met my ranch hands, saw that I employ men of all backgrounds, including 2 former slaves and a Chinese man. She told me I'd have to fire them if we were going to marry because she wouldn't have such people around." Quinn's voice was flat. "I told her I wouldn't fire good men just to satisfy her prejudices. She broke off the engagement and told everyone in town that I was a disgrace to the white race." Victoria absorbed this. That must have hurt. It did, but it also taught me something important. I needed to find someone who shared my values, not just someone who looked good on my arm at church socials. Quinn looked at her directly. "When I saw you with those children, taking in the ones nobody else wanted, treating them with kindness and respect regardless of their circumstances, I thought maybe you were someone who understood what really matters." "I just did what seemed right," Victoria said. "Exactly. You didn't do it for recognition or praise. You did it because it was right." Quinn shifted slightly closer. "That's the kind of person I want to build a life with." They talked for another hour, sharing stories from their pasts. Quinn told her more about the Boston orphanage, the harsh conditions and casual cruelty, the way he'd run away at 14 and worked his way west doing every kind of labor imaginable. Victoria shared memories of her childhood in Ohio, her love of teaching, the grief of losing her brother and sister-in-law. When they rode back to the ranch, Victoria felt like she understood her husband better. He wasn't just a successful rancher making a practical arrangement. He was a man who'd clawed his way up from nothing and never forgotten where he came from. A man with principles who wouldn't compromise them even for love. A man who, despite his matter-of-fact exterior, had depths she was only beginning to see. Over the following weeks, something began to shift between them. Quinn made time for these rides, just the 2 of them, exploring different parts of the ranch and talking about everything and nothing. Victoria found herself looking forward to these moments, to the sound of his voice, and the way he listened when she spoke. She noticed small things about him, the way he pushed his hair back when he was thinking, the half-smile he'd get when one of the children did something amusing, the careful way he moved around her, always respectful of her space. One evening, about 2 months into their marriage, Victoria was reading to the younger children when Quinn came in from the range. He was dusty and tired, but he stopped to listen to the story, leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed and a soft expression on his face. When the story ended and the children scattered to their various activities, he approached Victoria. "You're good with them," he said. "The way you make even simple stories come alive. They hang on every word." "I always loved teaching," Victoria said, setting the book aside. "This is different, but it's still teaching in a way." "Have you thought about starting a school? A real one?" Quinn asked. "There are several ranch families in the area with children who need education. You could teach here in one of the unused buildings. I could help convert it into a schoolhouse." Victoria stared at him. "You do that? Why not? You have the skills and the desire. The community needs it, and it would give you something that's yours, separate from just being a wife and mother." Quinn sat down beside her on the sofa, closer than he usually sat. "I want you to be happy here, Victoria, truly happy, not just secure." It was the first time he'd used her given name instead of Miss Ashford or Mrs. O'Brien. The intimacy of it made her heart skip. "Quinn," she said, testing his name on her tongue. "That's a wonderful idea, thank you." He smiled, a full, genuine smile. "You're welcome." He hesitated, then added, "I know I said we'd take things slow, but I want you to know that I care about you, Victoria. This has become more than just a practical arrangement for me." Victoria's breath caught. She realized she'd been feeling the same shift, the way her heart would lift when he came in for dinner, the way she'd started noticing the strength in his hands and the kindness in his eyes. "For me too," she admitted softly. Quinn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I'd like to court you properly. Even though we're already married, I'd like to do this right. Take you to town socials, bring you flowers, all the things I should have done before." "I'd like that," Victoria said, her hand warm in his. They began courting. It was unconventional, certainly, married people dating each other, but it worked for them. Quinn brought her wildflowers from the range. They attended a church social together in town, and Quinn kept his hand at the small of her back, a gesture of both protection and affection. They took rides in the evening after the children were in bed, watching the sun set over the plains and talking about their hopes for the future. The children noticed the change. Sarah, always observant, asked Victoria one morning while they were preparing breakfast, "Do you love Mr. Quinn now?" Victoria considered the question carefully. Did she love him? The feelings growing in her heart were tender and complex, built on respect and friendship and increasing affection. "I think I'm starting to," she told Sarah honestly. "Love takes time to grow sometimes." "He's good to us," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "I didn't trust him at first. But he's kept his promises." "Yes, he has." Victoria smiled at the serious child. "Do you like living here?" "I like having enough food. I like having my own bed. I like that nobody calls me names here." Sarah paused in her work. "And I like that you're not so worried all the time anymore." "You smile more now," did she? Victoria hadn't realized, but Sarah was right. The constant tension she'd carried for months had eased. She felt safe here. More than that, she felt valued and cared for. That night after dinner, Quinn asked Victoria to walk with him. They strolled around the property in the cool evening air, Quinn's hand eventually finding hers and holding it gently. "I've been thinking," Quinn said, "about the sleeping arrangements." Victoria's heart began to race. "We've been married 3 months now. We've been courting for the past few weeks, and I think we've come to know and care for each other." Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her. "But I want you to know that I'm still not going to pressure you. If you want to keep separate rooms, we will. But if you're ready for this to become a real marriage in all ways, I'm ready too." Victoria looked up at him in the dimming light. His face was serious but open, waiting for her answer without judgment. She thought about the past 3 months, about how he'd been patient and kind and respectful, how he'd kept every promise he made, how he'd treated the children like they were his own blood, how her feelings for him had grown from wary respect to genuine affection to something deeper that was starting to feel very much like love. "I'm ready," she said quietly. "I want this to be a real marriage." Quinn's expression softened with relief and something warmer. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Victoria stepped closer and raised herself on her toes, pressing her lips to his. It was the first real kiss they'd shared, and it was sweet and tentative and full of promise. Quinn's arms came around her carefully, holding her close but not too tight, giving her the space to pull away if she chose. But Victoria didn't pull away. She leaned into him, into his warmth and strength, and let herself feel the full force of what was blooming between them. That night, Victoria moved her things into Quinn's room. He was patient and gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Victoria realized that she'd found something she hadn't expected when she'd agreed to this arrangement. She'd found love. "What are you thinking?" Quinn asked, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. "That I'm happy," Victoria said. "Truly happy. I didn't think I would be when this started, but I am." Quinn pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "So am I. You and those children, you've made this house into a home. You've made my life into something more than just work and sleep." They lay there in comfortable silence for a while before Victoria said, "Quinn, can I tell you something? Anything? I love you." The words came out soft but certain. "I didn't plan to. I thought this would just be a partnership, but I love you." Quinn tightened his arms around her. "I love you too, Victoria. I have for weeks now, but I didn't want to say it and make you feel pressured." "No pressure," Victoria said, smiling against his chest. "Just truth." The winter came, but inside the ranch house it was warm and full of life. Quinn had indeed converted one of the storage buildings into a schoolhouse, and Victoria began teaching not just their own children, but also the children from 3 neighboring ranches. She loved having her purpose back, loved shaping young minds and seeing the progress her students made. The children thrived. Tommy grew stronger, though his foot would never be quite right. But Quinn taught him to ride despite the disability, finding him a gentle horse and adapting the stirrup to accommodate his foot. Tommy became confident on horseback, his face glowing with pride when he successfully helped drive cattle from one pasture to another. James lost some of his shyness, becoming a chatterbox who asked constant questions about everything he saw. The ranch hands grew fond of him, patiently explaining their work and letting him help with small tasks. Michael flourished under Quinn's mentorship, learning the skills of ranch work and growing in confidence. At 11, he was still young, but he was learning fast, and Quinn told Victoria he thought the boy had real potential. Ruth came out of her shell slowly but surely, especially once she discovered Quinn's small collection of books. She'd curl up in the office and read for hours, and Quinn made a point of ordering new books from back east specifically for her. And Sarah, wary Sarah who trusted no one, gradually began to let her guard down. She attached herself to Victoria, but also began to show affection for Quinn, especially after he spent an entire evening teaching her a card game and treating her wins with serious respect. One evening in late winter, after the children were in bed, Victoria and Quinn sat together on the sofa in front of the fire. Victoria was mending clothes while Quinn reviewed ranch accounts, a comfortable domestic scene that had become their routine. "I heard something in town today," Quinn said, setting aside his papers. "The landlord who was trying to evict you, he's apparently been complaining around town that you owed him money and ran off without paying." Victoria's hand stilled. "I didn't run off. We got married and I moved." "I know that, and I went to see him today. I paid your back rent and the early termination of your lease. He has no claim on you now." Quinn reached over and took her hand. "I should have done it sooner. I didn't want him spreading lies about you. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You're my wife. Those debts became my responsibility. But more than that, I won't have anyone in this town thinking poorly of you." Quinn squeezed her hand. "I also made it clear that if he continues to spread rumors, he'll answer to me." Victoria felt a rush of warmth for this man who protected her so fiercely. She set aside her mending and moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you." "Always," Quinn said, wrapping his arm around her. Spring came, and with it, new life on the ranch. Calves were born, foals appeared in the pastures, and the children delighted in all of it. Victoria discovered she was pregnant in late April, and when she told Quinn, his face lit up with joy. "A baby," he said, his hand moving to her still flat stomach with wonder. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Victoria asked, though his expression made the answer clear. "Incredibly happy. You've already given me so much, a family, a home full of life, and now this." Quinn pulled her into an embrace. "I love you so much, Victoria. I love you too." They told the children together that evening. The reactions were varied. Michael and Ruth were excited. James wanted to know if babies could ride horses. Tommy was confused about how babies worked. And Sarah asked seriously if this meant Victoria wouldn't love her anymore. Victoria knelt down to Sarah's level, taking the girl's hands. "Sarah, I will always love you just as much as I do right now. Having a new baby doesn't change how I feel about you or any of your siblings. You're all my children, every single one of you. Promise." Sarah's dark eyes were worried. "I promise. You were my first child, Sarah. You'll always hold a special place in my heart." Quinn added, "And you're all going to be big brothers and sisters. That's an important job. This baby is going to need all of you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Victoria continued teaching through the summer, only stopping when she became too large to comfortably stand for long periods. Quinn was attentive and protective, making sure she didn't overwork herself, bringing her treats from town, staying close even though the ranch demanded his attention. In early November, on a crisp autumn morning, Victoria went into labor. Mrs. Chen had experience with birthing babies and helped deliver the child with Quinn pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. When the baby's first cry filled the air, Quinn burst in despite Mrs. Chen's protests about propriety. "Is Victoria all right?" he demanded. "I'm fine," Victoria said, exhausted but smiling. "Come meet your son." Quinn approached the bed with something like awe on his face. The baby was red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and tiny fingers that wrapped around Quinn's when he offered one. "A son," Quinn breathed. "We have a son." "What should we name him?" Victoria asked. Quinn was quiet for a moment, staring down at the baby. "What about James? For your brother?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Quinn knew how much she still missed her brother, how much she wished he could have seen the life she'd built. "James Quinn O'Brien," she said. "It's perfect." The children were allowed in one at a time to meet their new brother. Each of them approached with wonder, the baby suddenly making the family feel complete in a way nothing else had. Sarah held the baby with careful supervision, her face serious as always but her eyes soft. "He's very small," she observed. "You were even smaller once," Victoria told her. "I'll protect him," Sarah declared. "I'm his big sister. That's my job." Victoria met Quinn's eyes over Sarah's head, and they shared a smile full of love and contentment. The ranch continued to prosper. With Victoria's teaching bringing in families from all over the area, Quinn's reputation grew. People saw how he'd taken in Victoria and her orphans, how he'd given them all a real home and family. They saw the kind of man he was, principled and hardworking and fair. More families began to settle in the area, drawn by the sense of community that was developing. When little James was 6 months old, a young woman appeared at the ranch house door carrying a baby girl. She was thin and desperate, barely more than a girl herself. "I heard you taken children who need homes," she said to Victoria, tears streaming down her face. "I can't care for her. Her father left me and I can't feed her on my own. Please, I heard you're good people." Victoria looked at the baby, then at the young mother's devastated face. She thought about how she'd felt months ago when she'd been desperate and alone with children depending on her. She thought about Quinn's words that first day at the ranch about wanting a family. "Let me speak with my husband," Victoria said gently. "Come inside. You look like you need food and rest." She found Quinn in the barn and explained the situation. He listened carefully, then asked, "What do you want to do?" "I want to help her. But this is your home too. We already have 6 children. What's one more?" Quinn smiled. "If you want to take in the baby, we'll take in the baby. We have the space and the resources, and that little girl deserves a chance." "We should help the mother too," Victoria said. "Maybe we could give her work, help her get back on her feet." She shouldn't have to give up her child out of desperation. Quinn considered this. "Mrs. Chen has been saying she could use help with the household now that we have so many children. What if we offered the girl a position here? She could work for her room and board and keep her baby." "If that's what she wants." "You do that, Victoria. You taught me that family isn't always about blood. It's about showing up for people who need you. If we can help this girl and her baby, why wouldn't we?" They offered the arrangement to the young mother, whose name was Emma. She accepted with grateful tears, and suddenly the household expanded again. Emma proved to be a hard worker, and having her baby close gave her the motivation to rebuild her life. Little Caroline, the baby, became another sibling for the older children to dote on. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growing children. Sarah grew into a thoughtful, intelligent young woman who loved learning and helped Victoria teach the younger students. Tommy's confidence on horseback translated to confidence in other areas, and though he always walked with a limp, he never let it hold him back. James the elder lost his shyness entirely and became the ranch's unofficial greeter, charming everyone who visited. Michael apprenticed seriously under Quinn, and by 15 was managing entire sections of ranch operations. Ruth remained quiet and bookish, but found her voice when she began writing stories. Victoria and Quinn had 2 more children of their own, a daughter they named Sarah Victoria after the girl who'd been Victoria's first child, and another son they called Thomas after the boy who taught them all about perseverance. The ranch became known throughout Wyoming territory as a place of opportunity and acceptance. Quinn employed men from all backgrounds and paid them fairly. Victoria's school grew to teach over 30 children from families across the region. The O'Brien family became synonymous with hard work, integrity, and compassion. One evening, about 8 years after that first meeting at the ranch, Victoria and Quinn sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. 9 children of various ages played in the yard while baby Thomas napped in his cradle nearby. Emma, now married to one of the ranch hands and living in a small house on the property, walked past with Caroline toddling beside her. "You ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "That I came with so much baggage, so many complications." Quinn took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long familiarity. "I don't regret a single moment. You gave me everything I wanted but didn't know how to ask for. A real family, a home full of love and life. Children to raise and watch grow. You gave me that too," Victoria said. "When I met you, I was drowning. You threw me a lifeline, but it became so much more than that." "We saved each other," Quinn said simply. He pulled her closer and she rested her head on his shoulder. "And we built something beautiful together." Sarah the elder approached the porch, now 15 and poised on the edge of adulthood. "Papa, Mama, I've been thinking about what I want to do when I'm older." "What's that, sweetheart?" Quinn asked. "I want to be a teacher like Mama. But I want to go to the tribal lands and teach there. Teach children like me who are caught between two worlds." Sarah's voice was earnest. "I want to help them the way you both helped me." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "That's a wonderful goal, Sarah." "You've taught her well," Quinn said to Victoria. "Taught all of them to think about how they can help others." After Sarah went back to the other children, Victoria said softly, "I love you, Quinn O'Brien, more than I ever thought possible when you first proposed this arrangement." "I love you too, Victoria O'Brien. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for wanting us, all of us, even when we were broken and difficult and came with complications." "Especially then," Quinn said, "because that's when you needed someone the most." They sat together as the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge, surrounded by the sounds of children's laughter and the peaceful life they'd built together. What had started as a practical arrangement between strangers had become a love story for the ages, proof that family was what you made it, and that sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the most unexpected beginnings. The ranch thrived for generations, passed down to the children and their children, always remaining a place where those who needed help could find it. And in the family Bible, on the page where Quinn and Victoria had signed their marriage certificate, there was a note written in Quinn's careful hand. "Today I married a woman I barely knew to give orphan children a home. I gained everything that matters." Below it, in Victoria's elegant script, was written, "Today I married a stranger out of desperation. I found my home, my family, and the greatest love I could have imagined." Their story became legend in Wyoming, the tale of the rancher who said he wanted the orphans nobody else would take, and the woman who came with them. But to Quinn and Victoria, it was simply their life, the beautiful, complicated, perfect life they'd built together one day at a time, with patience and respect, and a love that grew deeper with every passing year. As Michael prepared to take over more of the ranch operations, he asked his father one day what the secret was to building something lasting. Quinn thought about the question seriously before answering. "Find someone who shares your values. Build on a foundation of respect and honesty. Be patient with growth, whether it's cattle or crops or relationships. And never forget that the most important thing isn't the land or the money or the status. It's the people you love and who love you back." "Is that how you and Mama built all this?" "That's exactly how we did it." Quinn looked over at Victoria, who was teaching a class in the schoolhouse, her face animated as she shared knowledge with eager students. "I was smart enough to recognize quality when I saw it, and lucky enough that she took a chance on me." "I think she was the lucky one," Michael said loyally. Quinn smiled. "We were both lucky. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need right when you need it most. Your mama needed security and help for you children. I needed a family and someone to share this life with. We met each other's needs, but somewhere along the way, we found we met each other's hearts too." That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner as they did every night, a tradition Quinn and Victoria had established from the beginning. The table had been expanded multiple times over the years to accommodate their growing family. Now it seated 13 comfortably, with high chairs for the youngest ones on the ends. As Quinn looked around the table at the faces of the children they'd raised together, at Victoria's gentle smile and bright eyes, at the abundant food and warm home they'd created, he felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. This was what success really looked like. Not just the profitable ranch or the respect of the community, but this, family and love and belonging. After dinner, Quinn helped Victoria clear the table while the older children supervised the younger ones getting ready for bed. It was a nightly dance they'd perfected over years of practice. "Do you remember the first time you brought the children here?" Quinn asked as he dried a dish. "How overwhelmed you looked." "I was terrified," Victoria admitted. "I thought you were either crazy or had some ulterior motive I hadn't figured out yet. And now I know you're a little bit crazy, but in the best way." Victoria's eyes sparkled with humor and affection. "You had faith in something I couldn't see yet. You believed we could be a real family. I'm glad I was right." Quinn set down the dish and pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Best decision I ever made, marrying you. Best decision I ever made, saying yes." They finished the dishes in comfortable silence, then made the rounds to each bedroom, saying good night to each child. Sarah the younger and Tommy were reading together, heads bent over a book. Little James and Caroline were already asleep, tumbled together like puppies. Michael and Ruth were at the table finishing homework, serious and focused. And in the nursery, baby Thomas slept peacefully in his cradle. Finally, Quinn and Victoria retreated to their own room, the space that had become their sanctuary. Quinn sat on the edge of the bed and pulled off his boots while Victoria brushed out her long hair in front of the mirror. "I was thinking," Quinn said, "maybe it's time we took a trip. Just the two of us. Mrs. Chen and Emma can manage the children for a few days. We could go to Denver, stay in a nice hotel, see the city." "A second honeymoon," Victoria turned to face him. "Something like that. We've been so focused on the children and the ranch that we haven't taken time for just us in years." Victoria came to sit beside him, taking his hand. "I'd like that. A chance to be just Quinn and Victoria for a few days, not Mama and Papa. Then we'll do it. Next month, after the spring branding is done." Quinn brought her hand to his lips. "I want to keep courting you for the rest of our lives, Victoria. Keep reminding you that you're precious to me, not just as a mother and a partner, but as a woman I love." "You do remind me," Victoria said softly. "Every day, in 100 small ways. But I'd still love a few days in Denver with you." They made plans for the trip as they prepared for bed, excited like young sweethearts at the prospect of time alone together. When they finally settled under the quilts, Victoria curled into Quinn's side as naturally as breathing. "Quinn, thank you for being patient with me in the beginning, for giving me time to fall in love with you instead of demanding it right away. Thank you for eventually falling in love with me." Quinn's voice was drowsy and content. "Although I have to admit, there were moments early on when I worried you never would. You were so wary of me. I'd learned to be wary. Life had taught me that anything that seemed too good to be true usually was." Victoria traced patterns on his chest. "But you proved me wrong. You were exactly who you claimed to be." "I try to be." Quinn was quiet for a moment. "You know what I'm most proud of?" "What?" "That all of our children, biological and adopted, they don't see distinctions between themselves. They're all just siblings who love each other. We did that. We created a family where everyone belongs." "We did do that," Victoria agreed. "And they're all wonderful, every single one of them." They're going to go out into the world and make it better, just like we tried to do. They drifted off to sleep, secure in each other's arms and in the life they'd built. Outside, the Wyoming wind swept across the plains, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of another season on the ranch. Inside the O'Brien home, 9 children slept safely, loved and wanted and cherished, each one knowing they belonged. The years continued their steady march. Sarah the elder did eventually go to teach on the tribal lands, making a real difference for children caught between 2 cultures. Tommy became a renowned horse trainer, his disability giving him a unique empathy for animals others had given up on. James the elder took over the social aspects of ranch management, his outgoing personality making him a natural negotiator. Michael became Quinn's true successor, taking over more of the daily ranch operations as Quinn aged. Ruth published her first book at 20, a collection of stories about ranch life that became popular throughout the West. And Victoria and Quinn's biological children, little James, Sarah, Victoria, and Thomas, grew up secure in a home filled with love and siblings and purpose. They never knew want or neglect or the fear of being unwanted. They grew up understanding that family was about love, not blood, and that their home was always open to those who needed help. The trip to Denver became a yearly tradition for Quinn and Victoria, a few days each spring when they reconnected as a couple apart from their roles as parents and ranch owners. They'd walk the city streets hand in hand, go to the theater, eat in nice restaurants, and remember what it was like to be just 2 people in love. On their 10th anniversary, Quinn took Victoria to a jewelry store in Denver and bought her a new wedding ring, this one with a small diamond. "I couldn't afford a nice ring when we married," he said as he slipped it onto her finger. "But I can now, and I want you to have something that shows how precious you are to me." Victoria looked at the ring, then up at her husband. His hair was starting to show silver at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as ever, perhaps more so, because now she knew the depths of his character and the strength of his love. "I don't need diamonds to know I'm precious to you," she said. "You show me that every day, but I love the ring and I love you." They renewed their vows that night in the hotel room, just the 2 of them speaking promises to each other with no witnesses but the moon shining through the window. It was intimate and sacred, a recommitment to the partnership they'd built and the love they'd grown. When they returned to the ranch, Victoria was pregnant again, their 4th biological child. Quinn joked that maybe they should go to Denver more often, and Victoria blushed and swatted his arm. But they were both delighted at the prospect of another baby, even with the house already full of children. Emma had long since moved to her own home with her husband and growing family, but she still worked closely with the O'Briens, managing much of the household staff as the ranch operations had expanded. She'd become like a younger sister to Victoria, and their children grew up as close as cousins. The 4th child was another boy, and they named him Peter, after the ranch hand who'd driven Victoria to the ranch that first day and who'd passed away the previous winter. Pete had been one of Quinn's first employees and most loyal friends, and naming a child after him felt right. As the children grew older and began to build their own lives, the house slowly emptied. It was bittersweet, watching them ride off to their own adventures, but Quinn and Victoria had raised them to be independent and capable. They'd given each child roots and wings, as Victoria liked to say. Sarah the younger eventually married a teacher from Denver and moved to the city, though she visited often with her own children. Michael married a neighboring rancher's daughter and took over a section of the O'Brien ranch, building his own home nearby. Tommy married a quiet woman who loved horses as much as he did, and they started a horse training operation that became famous throughout Wyoming and Colorado. James married his childhood sweetheart and became active in territorial politics. Ruth married a newspaper editor and continued her writing career while raising 4 children. Little James, Sarah, Victoria, and Thomas were still young when the older 5 had mostly moved out, so they got a second childhood with more of their parents' focused attention. By the time they were grown and making their own ways in the world, Quinn and Victoria were in their 50s, looking toward the later years of their lives. But they weren't slowing down. Quinn still rode the range daily, though now Michael handled most of the physical work. Victoria still taught, though now it was mostly remedial classes for adults who'd never learned to read. They'd built something lasting, and now they could enjoy watching it continue without them at the center of it all. One evening, sitting on their porch and watching the sunset just as they had countless times before, Quinn said, "If I died tomorrow, I'd die a happy man." "Don't talk about dying," Victoria said, squeezing his hand. "I'm not planning on it anytime soon," Quinn assured her. "But I mean it. If my life ended right now, I'd have no regrets. I got everything I wanted and more than I deserved." "You deserve all of it," Victoria said firmly. "You're a good man, Quinn O'Brien, the best man I've ever known. That's only because you made me better. You and the children, you gave me purpose beyond just building wealth and security. You taught me what really matters." Victoria rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and sage and home. "We taught each other. That's what a good marriage is, I think. 2 people making each other better." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the first stars emerged. Inside the house, there was the sound of laughter as their grandchildren who were visiting played with their youngest children. The ranch stretched around them, prosperous and alive, a legacy they'd built together. "No regrets?" Quinn asked softly. "Not a single one," Victoria confirmed. "Saying yes to you was the best decision I ever made. Even when I was terrified and uncertain, even when it seemed crazy, it was right." "I knew it from the moment I saw you with those children," Quinn said. "I knew you were who I'd been looking for, even though I didn't know I was looking. You were caring for orphans nobody wanted, and I wanted them, and I wanted you." "And you got us," Victoria said, turning to kiss him softly. "All of us, forever." The stars wheeled overhead as they had for countless nights, as they would for countless more. Inside the O'Brien home, a family continued to grow and thrive, built on the foundation of 2 people who'd taken a chance on each other and found everything they'd needed. The ranch would continue for generations, a testament to what could be built when respect and compassion formed the basis of love. And years later, when Quinn and Victoria had both passed into memory, their descendants would still tell the story of how it all began with a woman caring for unwanted children and a rancher who had the wisdom to see what others had missed. A love story that started with practicality and grew into something legendary, proving that sometimes the best romances weren't the ones that started with passion, but the ones that built toward it, day by day, with patience and care and choosing each other over and over again. The O'Brien Ranch stood as a monument to that love, to the family they'd built, and to the truth that sometimes the most broken things, when mended with love and care, became the strongest and most beautiful of all.